In the ancient world, over 5,000 years ago, something happened that would change the course of human history forever. This is not mythology, this is not legend. This is a documented account from one of the oldest religious texts ever discovered, a text so controversial that it was hidden away for nearly 20,000 years. What you're about to hear is the story of the Nephilim. Archaeological evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947 in the caves of Qumran, revealed fragments of this ancient manuscript. Scholars call it the Book of Enoch. Written in the centuries before Christ, this text describes events that occurred before the greatest catastrophe the world has ever known, the global flood that Genesis describes in such stark terms. But this isn't just ancient history. Many theologians and biblical scholars believe that what happened to the Nephilim after they died explains one of the greatest mysteries of our modern world. Where do demons come from? The story begins not on earth, but in heaven itself. Hesiasterajaj 12:12, the ancient mystery unveiled. Before we journey into this remarkable account, we need to understand what we're dealing with. The Book of Enoch is considered pseudepigraphal by most modern Christian denominations, meaning its authorship and divine inspiration are debated. Yet this ancient text was quoted in the New Testament book of Jude, and fragments of it were treasured by the early church. For nearly 2 millennia, the complete Book of Enoch was lost to the Western world. Ethiopian Christians preserved it in their Ge'ez language, keeping alive a text that European scholars thought had vanished forever. Then, in the 18th century, Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3 copies back from Ethiopia. The discovery electrified the scholarly world. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 20th century, archaeologists found multiple fragments of Enoch among them, proof that this text was read and valued by ancient Jewish communities. Carbon dating places these fragments between 200 BCE and 50 CE, making them some of the oldest biblical-era manuscripts ever found. Why does this matter? Because the Book of Enoch provides detailed backstory to one of the Bible's most mysterious verses. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4 tells us, when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. That's it, 4 verses. No explanation of who these sons of God were. No details about the Nephilim. No clarification about what happened to them. The Book of Enoch fills in these blanks with stunning, sometimes disturbing detail. It names, it describes motives, it explains consequences that echo into our present day. Now, before we go further, let's address something important. Different faith traditions view this text differently. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church considers it canonical scripture. The Roman Catholic and Protestant churches do not, though they acknowledge its historical significance. Jewish tradition has complex views on its authenticity. What we can say with certainty is this: the Book of Enoch represents ancient Jewish thought about the origins of evil, the nature of fallen angels, and the spiritual forces at work in our world. Whether you view it as inspired scripture or as valuable historical theology, its influence on early Christian thinking is undeniable. The name Enoch itself is significant. According to Genesis, Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. The Bible tells us something extraordinary about him. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. He didn't die, God simply took him to heaven while he was still alive, making him one of only 2 people in the Old Testament to bypass death entirely. This made Enoch a figure of immense fascination in ancient Jewish literature. If God took him directly to heaven, what secrets might he have learned there? What mysteries of the cosmos might he have witnessed? The Book of Enoch presents itself as that very testimony, a first-person account of heavenly visions, angelic revelations, and cosmic secrets. Real or attributed, this text shaped how generations of believers understood the supernatural realm. If you're finding this fascinating, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We dive deep into biblical mysteries that most people never hear about. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. What makes this particular story so gripping is that it addresses a question humans have asked since the beginning. Why is there evil in the world? Where did it come from? And more unsettling, are those ancient evil forces still active today? The Book of Enoch's answer is as dramatic as it is specific. Evil intensified on earth when heavenly beings abandoned their posts and interfered with human development. Their hybrid offspring beings that were neither fully human nor fully angelic became corrupted monsters whose appetites grew beyond all natural bounds. And when these giants died in the flood, their spirits had nowhere to go. Think about that for a moment. According to this text, demons aren't fallen angels themselves. Fallen angels, the Watchers, are bound in prison, awaiting judgment. Demons are something else entirely, the disembodied spirits of beings that should never have existed in the first place. Spirits without bodies, wandering the earth, desperately seeking to possess the living. It's a chilling concept. And if there's any truth to it, it means that what happened thousands of years ago still affects us every single day. The ancient world understood something that our modern, materialistic age often forgets. There is an invisible realm that intersects with ours. Spiritual warfare isn't metaphorical, it's actual. And the enemies we face today have their origins in a rebellion that happened when civilization was still young. So let's go back to that moment. Let's go back to when angels walked on earth, when giants ruled through terror, and when the very fabric of creation was threatened by beings that defied the natural order. Let's go back to Mount Hermon, in the land we now call the Golan Heights, where 200 angels made a decision that would damn them forever. Hasdruk Chu, Hejavan's rebellion. When angels fell, picture heaven as the ancient Israelites understood it, not the ethereal clouds of Renaissance paintings, but a cosmic throne room where divine beings served the Creator in perfect harmony. Among these beings were the angels known as Watchers, their very title describing their function. They watched over humanity. These weren't the chubby cherubs of Valentine's Day cards. According to the Book of Enoch and other ancient Jewish texts, angels were powerful, intelligent beings with specific roles in maintaining cosmic order. Some managed the movements of stars. Others oversaw the weather, the seasons, the growth of plants. The Watchers had perhaps the most intimate assignment, observing human development, guiding without interfering, protecting without controlling. They were heaven's oversight committee for the earthly realm, but observation led to desire. The Book of Enoch tells us that during the days of Jared, whose name means descent, these Watchers began to notice human women. Not just notice, but covet. The text describes their growing obsession with mortal beauty, their increasing fixation on what they could not have. Historical context helps us understand how revolutionary this was. In the ancient Near East, the boundary between divine and human was considered absolute. Gods were gods. Humans were humans. This separation wasn't just social, it was ontological, woven into the very fabric of existence. For an angel to desire a human wasn't like a royal falling for a commoner. It was like a human falling in love with a painting and expecting it to step out of the frame. It violated category boundaries that were supposed to be inviolate. Yet desire, once kindled, is hard to extinguish. The Book of Enoch names the leader of this rebellion, Semyaza, sometimes spelled Semyaza or Shemihaza. Various ancient manuscripts preserve his name slightly differently, but they all agree on his role. He was the chief of the Watchers, the one who first voiced what others were thinking. "I fear," Semyaza told his fellows, "that you will not be willing to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty for a great sin." Think about what this reveals. Semyaza knew what he was proposing was wrong. He knew there would be consequences, but he also knew he wasn't the only one feeling these forbidden desires. So he proposed something that humans would later copy in their own conspiracies, a binding oath that would implicate everyone equally. No one could back out. No one could claim innocence. All would fall together. The Book of Enoch preserves the exact number. 200 angels took this oath on Mount Hermon. The location is specific and real. You can visit it today, a mountain on the border between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. Its name in Hebrew, Hermon, comes from a root word meaning devoted to destruction or cursed. Was it named that before the angels descended or after? Ancient sources disagree, but the symbolism is haunting either way. These 200 angels descended in the days of Jared, which scholars generally place around 3,500 to 3000 BCE, in the period Genesis describes simply as when men began to increase in number on the earth. The ancient world was entering what archaeologists call the early Bronze Age, a time when agriculture was well established, cities were beginning to form, and human civilization was becoming more complex. Into this developing world came beings with knowledge and power far beyond mortal ken. The Book of Enoch lists the leaders by name. Besides Samyaza, there was Azazel, whose name means scapegoat, and who would become particularly infamous for what he taught humans. There was Gadralis, name meaning God is my helper, a bitter irony given his betrayal. Panemu, Caspiel, Barakiel, Kokabiel, the list continues. Each name preserved in ancient manuscripts, each representing an individual choice to rebel. Is the kind of content that makes you think differently about the spiritual realm. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what biblical mystery you want covered next. Ask. These weren't impulsive beings acting on sudden passion. The Book of Enoch describes their conspiracy in detail, the planning, the oath-taking, the deliberate coordination. They knew the magnitude of what they were about to do. They did it anyway. Why? Pride plays a role in every rebellion. Perhaps these watchers grew tired of serving, of watching humanity receive God's special attention and favor. Perhaps they resented their role as observers of a species they considered inferior. Perhaps after ages of watching humans live, love, reproduce, and die, they wanted to experience physical existence themselves. Or perhaps, as some theologians suggest, they saw something in humanity that they wanted to corrupt the image of God that humans uniquely carried. By mixing angelic and human nature, they could create something new, something neither fully created in God's image nor fully angelic, something outside the divine order. Whatever their motivation, the consequences would be catastrophic. When these 200 angels descended to Mount Hermon, they didn't arrive subtly. Ancient texts describe their arrival as a cosmic event, lights in the sky, thunder, earthquakes. Humans in the surrounding regions would have known something extraordinary was happening. And then these magnificent beings, these watchers who glowed with otherworldly radiance, began taking human women as wives. The text says they chose for themselves whomever they wanted. This suggests force, coercion. How could a mortal woman refuse a being of such power? How could human men protect their daughters and sisters from creatures who could command the elements? They couldn't, and so the forbidden unions began. Some modern interpreters try to soften this, suggesting these relationships were consensual, perhaps even loving. The weight of the text suggests violation, a powerful species taking what they wanted from a weaker one. The word took in ancient Hebrew carries connotations of seizure, not courtship. Within these women, something began to grow, something that had never existed before, something that should never have existed at all. Chapter 3. The forbidden union. The biology of angels is not something we can easily understand. The Bible describes them as spirits, yet they could appear in physical form, eat food with Abraham, grab Lot by the arm to pull him from danger. They exist somehow in both material and immaterial realms. When these watchers took human wives, they were fully physical. They had to be, for the unions to produce offspring. But what kind of offspring could come from such a genetically impossible pairing? The answer: something monstrous. The pregnant women knew immediately that something was wrong. The Book of Enoch doesn't provide these details, but we can imagine their horror as their bodies changed in unnatural ways, as the life growing inside them moved with inhuman strength, as they felt beings that were too large, too powerful, too other to be normal children. When the Nephilim were born, their very appearance declared them different. The name Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root napho, meaning to fall. They were the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. Some ancient translations render it as giants, and indeed, their size was their most obvious characteristic, but they were more than just large humans. The Book of Enoch describes their size in terms that strain credibility. Some manuscripts say they grew to 300 cubits tall, 450 feet, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Most scholars believe this is either metaphorical or the result of textual corruption over centuries of copying. But even if we assume the number is exaggerated, the point remains clear. These beings were enormous, far larger than any natural human. Gigantism, in the medical sense, produces people who might reach 7 or 8 feet tall before their bodies fail under the strain. The Nephilim seem to have no such limitations. They grew and grew, reaching heights that made them seem like gods to ordinary humans. But their size was only part of what made them terrible. The Nephilim inherited intelligence from their angelic fathers, vast, cosmic intelligence that normal humans couldn't match. They understood things that humans had never discovered. They could perform calculations, grasp concepts, and learn skills with supernatural speed. They also inherited strength that went beyond what their size alone would suggest. These weren't just big people who could lift heavy things. They were supernaturally powerful beings who could tear trees from the ground, hurl boulders like pebbles, and kill ordinary humans as easily as we might swat a fly. Perhaps most disturbing, they seemed to inherit their father's spiritual nature as well, giving them abilities that crossed into what we would call magic or psychic powers. Some ancient texts suggest they could read minds, appear in dreams, and even manipulate the spiritual realm in ways humans couldn't. Preacher, if this is blowing your mind, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Biblical archaeology and ancient texts reveal things that Sunday school never taught you. As the Nephilim grew from infants to children to adults, another problem became apparent: their appetites. The Book of Enoch states this plainly. They consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. Think about the mathematics of this. A being 15 or 20 feet tall, let alone larger, would require enormous amounts of food. Some estimates suggest a person of that size would need to consume 20,000 to 50,000 calories per day just to maintain their body. At first, the Nephilim ate what humans produced, the grain from their fields, the animals from their herds. But even when entire communities devoted all their agricultural output to feeding one of these giants, it wasn't enough. The giants' hunger was insatiable, so they expanded their diet. First, they consumed all the wild animals they could catch. Forests were emptied of game. Rivers were depleted of fish. The natural balance of ecosystems collapsed under the predation of beings with appetites that no ecosystem could sustain. And then, when the animals ran out, the giants began eating humans. Cannibalism. This is where the account becomes truly horrific. The Book of Enoch doesn't shy away from this detail, it emphasizes it. These beings, born of human mothers, began consuming humanity itself. Ancient texts from cultures all around the world preserve legends of giants who ate people. Greek myths told of cyclopes and titans who devoured humans. Norse legends spoke of Jotnar, who threatened to consume all of Midgard. Mesopotamian texts described demon giants who fed on human flesh. Were all these cultures independently inventing the same story? Or were they preserving distorted memories of real events that traumatized early humanity? The Nephilim didn't just eat human flesh according to some texts. They also drank blood. This violated one of the most fundamental taboos God had given humanity. Blood represented life itself and was sacred. To consume it was to profane the very essence of creation. But the Nephilim had no reverence for such boundaries. They were themselves violations of natural order. Why would they respect other divine limits? And they bred. This is often overlooked in retellings, but it's crucial. The Nephilim reproduced. The Book of Enoch suggests they took human wives themselves, producing second-generation hybrids. Some texts hint they might have reproduced with each other as well, creating a race of beings that was becoming more established with each generation. The world was being overrun by monsters that should never have existed, but their numerical growth was only part of the problem. The real catastrophe was what their fathers, the Watchers, were teaching humanity. Chapter 4. Rise of the Nephilim Giants. To understand the full horror of what the Nephilim became, we need to picture the world they inhabited. This wasn't the densely populated Earth of today. Human population in the 3rd millennium BCE was small, perhaps only a few million people scattered across the continents. Early cities were just beginning to emerge in Mesopotamia, Uruk, Eridu, places where a few thousand people might gather. Most humans still lived in small agricultural villages or as nomadic herders. They had basic technology, pottery, simple metalworking, woven textiles, primitive weapons. Into this world came beings who stood head and shoulders and torso and legs above the tallest human. Imagine being a Bronze Age farmer and seeing something 20 feet tall walking toward your village. The psychological impact alone would be devastating. The Nephilim didn't integrate peacefully into human society. How could they? They were biologically incapable of fitting in. Their very existence required domination of their environment. Ancient texts describe them building great cities of their own structures, scaled to their massive size with doorways and rooms that would dwarf normal architecture. Archaeological anomalies sometimes pointed to as evidence include cyclopean wall structures built with stone so massive that ancient peoples couldn't imagine humans moving them, so they attributed them to giants or gods. Whether or not any physical evidence of Nephilim construction survives is debated. But what's clear from the textual record is that these beings established themselves as rulers over humanity. They became the mighty men of old, men of renown that Genesis mentions. But this renown wasn't earned through heroism or virtue. It was imposed through terror and superior force. The Book of Enoch describes the Nephilim fighting among themselves as well. When beings of such power and pride came into conflict, the results were cataclysmic. Their wars leveled mountains, diverted rivers, and scarred the landscape itself. Picture two 20-foot giants fighting with weapons scaled to their size swords as long as trees, spears like telephone poles. The collateral damage to anything nearby would be extreme. Human settlements caught in the middle of Nephilim conflicts would be crushed as casually as anthills beneath wrestling children. Some ancient texts suggest the Nephilim organized themselves into kingdoms, with the strongest and most cunning ruling over territories and demanding tribute from both human and giant alike. They built hierarchies of power that mirrored and mocked the heavenly order their fathers had abandoned. Drop a comment below. Do you think giants really existed? Archaeological evidence is more fascinating than you might think. Nephilim also seem to have inherited their father's longevity. Angels are eternal, and while the Nephilim could die, they didn't age like humans. A Nephilim born a century before the flood would still be in the prime of life when the waters came. This created another problem. They had time to perfect their cruelty, to establish systems of oppression, to spread their influence across vast distances. A human tyrant might die after a few decades of rule. A Nephilim tyrant could rule for centuries, but the physical threat the Nephilim posed wasn't the only problem, perhaps not even the primary problem. Their fathers, the Watchers, were teaching humanity secrets that would corrupt civilization at its roots. Chastaruk 5, Corruption of Naulid. They also decided to share knowledge that humanity wasn't ready to possess, knowledge that, in some cases, humanity was never meant to have. The Book of Enoch names specific, Watchers and details exactly what each one taught. Azazel taught humans the art of metallurgy, but not to make plows and cooking pots. He showed them how to forge swords, spears, knives, and shields. He introduced the technology of warfare at an industrial scale. Before this, human conflict was personal and limited. One tribe might fight another with wooden clubs or stone axes, but casualties were relatively small. After Azazel's teaching, humans could outfit entire armies with metal weapons designed specifically to kill efficiently. Book of Enoch holds Azazel particularly responsible for violence and bloodshed. By teaching humans to make weapons, he didn't just give them technology, he cultivated a mindset that problems could be solved through superior force and that violence was a tool to be refined and perfected. But Azazel taught more than weaponsmithing. He also taught women what the text calls beautification arts, cosmetics, jewelry making, the use of antimony and eye paint. This might seem innocent compared to teaching warfare, but the text presents it as equally corrupting. Why? Because Azazel taught these arts specifically to enhance sexual allure. to use beauty as manipulation, to make physical appearance an idol. It wasn't about appropriate adornment, but about cultivating vanity and using sensual appeal as a form of power and control. Gadriel, whose name means God is my warrior, taught the art of assassination. He showed humans how to make poison and how to use it undetectably. He taught them how to kill secretly, without risk, without honor. Before Gadriel, killing was usually open and direct. After his teaching, murder could be hidden, denied, unprovable. This introduced a corrosive element into human society, the inability to trust even your closest companions, the fear that anyone might be trying to kill you in ways you couldn't defend against. Kanemu taught writing, but the Book of Enoch calls it writing with ink and paper, suggesting this wasn't about preserving sacred truths or communicating helpful information. The text says he taught humans to write in bitterness, possibly referring to writing curses, magical incantations, or deceptive contracts and documents. Writing is arguably humanity's greatest intellectual achievement, but like any tool, it can be used for good or evil. Pinemui apparently taught it primarily for malicious purposes. Casbiel taught humans about abortion and the striking of the embryo in the womb. This introduced the concept of deliberately ending pregnancy, violating the sacredness of life even before birth. Barakiel taught astrology, not the astronomy that helps us understand the cosmos, but the superstitious belief that stars and planets control human destiny. This replaced trust in God's providence with fatalism and the idea that we're helpless before cosmic forces. Kokabeel taught the signs, probably meaning omens, divination, and fortune-telling. He taught humans to look for supernatural guidance in everything except God himself. Tamiel taught astronomy, but apparently with a focus on using celestial knowledge for dark purposes. Azradel taught humans about the course of the moon, likely for timing magical rituals. Do you see the pattern? Every one of these teachings offered power but corrupted power, power divorced from wisdom, from morality, from submission to God, power that made humans feel like they could control reality through secret knowledge and technique. This is what scholars call forbidden knowledge. Not information that's inherently evil, but knowledge that humanity wasn't mature enough to handle, or knowledge that's only valuable if you're trying to manipulate and control rather than serve and love. If you're learning things you never heard in church, this channel is for you. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Asquith. The Watchers essentially jump-started human technological and intellectual development, but without the moral framework to use it wisely. It's like giving a toddler a chainsaw. The tool isn't evil, but the child isn't ready for it. The result was predictable. Humanity used this knowledge to dominate, exploit, and destroy. Metal weapons led to organized warfare and conquest. Cosmetics and beautification arts led to sexual exploitation and the treatment of people as objects. Poisons led to political assassination and the breakdown of social trust. Astrology and divination led people away from God towards superstition and spiritual bondage. Writing, potentially the most valuable of these gifts, was corrupted into a tool for recording curses, writing deceptive contracts, and spreading false teachings. The Watchers had taken humanity's innocent childhood and forced it into a corrupted adulthood. Like the serpent in Eden, offering knowledge that seemed desirable, the Watchers offered teachings that seemed empowering, but ultimately enslaved. And all the while, their giant offspring were consuming the human race. Ask chapter 6. The earth cries out. By the time several generations had passed since the Watchers descended, the world had become almost unrecognizable. The Book of Enoch uses vivid language to describe the state of creation. The earth made accusation against the lawless ones. It's a striking image, the earth itself, the soil and rocks and rivers crying out against the violence and corruption happening on its surface. Violence had become universal. Genesis tells us that the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. The Hebrew word used there is hamas, not the modern organization, but an ancient word meaning violence, cruelty, wrong, injustice. It suggests violence that violates the natural order, that goes against what should be. This wasn't just warfare between armies. This was violence woven into the fabric of daily life. The strong preyed on the weak constantly. Might made right. The Nephilim and the humans who emulated them took whatever they wanted, killed anyone who resisted, and lived without any restraint. The Book of Enoch describes blood soaking into the earth until the very ground was polluted. Ancient Israelites had a concept that blood carried spiritual weight. When innocent blood was shed, it cried out to God for justice. The more blood spilled, the more the earth itself became corrupted. But it wasn't just humans dying. The Watchers had taught humans and Nephilim alike to manipulate nature in ways that violated its created order. The text describes the corruption of animals crossbreeding different species to create chimeras that never should have existed. Part of this might have been through selective breeding, but some ancient interpreters understood it as something more sinister, the mixing of incompatible species through unnatural means, perhaps even through the same spiritual physical manipulation that created the Nephilim. The result was creatures that were monstrous, that suffered by merely existing, that upset the balance of nature. Ancient mythologies from around the world preserve memories of such beings. The griffin, the chimera, the manticore, part this and part that, existing in defiance of natural categories. Whether these were real creatures or symbolic representations of spiritual corruption, the point is clear. The boundaries God had established at creation were being deliberately violated. Plants, too, were being corrupted. The text suggests genetic manipulation of crops and the development of plants specifically for poisonous or narcotic purposes. Agriculture turned toward death rather than life. The few humans who still tried to live righteously found themselves in an impossible situation. Imagine trying to live a peaceful, godly life in a world ruled by giants who would eat you if you couldn't provide enough tribute. In a society where assassination through poison was common, where treaties meant nothing, where violence was celebrated and virtue was seen as weakness, these righteous remnant humans had to hide, to stay small and insignificant, hoping the monsters wouldn't notice them. They lived in constant fear. The Book of Enoch tells us their prayers reached heaven. Day and night, the faithful cried out to God, "How long will you tolerate this? When will you bring justice? Have you abandoned your creation to these monsters?" But it wasn't just humans praying for deliverance. The text says the earth itself cried out. The plants and animals, corrupted and suffering, cried out. Even the sun, moon, and stars, according to the Book of Enoch, reported what was happening to God. All creation was groaning under the weight of this corruption. And in heaven, God was preparing his response. Asterisk, what do you think? Could our world today be heading towards similar corruption? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss. Haskeh, Chastrix Chapter 7, Heaven's Council of Werask. While Earth descended into chaos, heaven maintained its perfect order, but the archangels, God's highest-ranking servants who had remained faithful, were deeply troubled by what they witnessed. The Book of Enoch names 4 archangels who came before God's throne to report on the crisis. Michael, whose name means "who is like God," the great warrior angel, commander of heaven's armies, defender of God's people. Gabriel, meaning "God is my strength," the messenger angel who would later announce the birth of John the Baptist and Jesus. Raphael, meaning "God heals," the angel associated with healing and restoration. And Uriel, meaning "God is my light," the angel of wisdom and understanding, who watches over the world and the underworld. These 4 approached the throne of God with evidence of what was happening on earth. The Book of Enoch presents this almost like a legal proceeding, the archangels acting as prosecutors, presenting their case. They reported about the Watchers who had abandoned their stations, revealing everything Azazel and the others had taught humanity. They described the Nephilim and their atrocities. They told God about the innocent blood being shed, about the corruption of nature, about the prayers of the faithful crying out for deliverance. Most poignantly, they asked, should not destruction come upon them? Think about what this means. The archangels, who had served alongside the Watchers, who had known them for eons, were now requesting their judgment. These weren't impersonal cosmic forces. These were beings who had once been friends, colleagues, fellow servants of God. But the Watchers' rebellion had been so complete, their corruption so total, that even their former companions could see no possibility of redemption. Some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. God's response was immediate and decisive. He would act. But his plan wouldn't be rushed or simple, it would be comprehensive, addressing every level of the corruption. First, he commanded Uriel to go to Noah. Noah was one of the few humans who had remained righteous despite the evil all around him. The text describes him as blameless among the people of his time, and someone who walked faithfully with God. Uriel was to warn Noah that a great flood was coming, a deluge that would cover the entire earth and destroy all the corruption that had taken root. Noah was to build an ark, a massive boat that would preserve himself, his family, and representatives of all the uncorrupted animals. This wasn't just about survival. It was about preserving a righteous seed, humans and animals that hadn't been genetically or spiritually corrupted by the Watcher's interference. Second, God commanded Raphael to bind Azazel. This is particularly significant because Azazel seems to have been the most active of the Watchers in corrupting humanity, teaching them weapons, warfare, and vanity. Raphael was to seize Azazel and cast him into the desert, into a place of sharp stones and darkness called Dewdale. There Azazel would be imprisoned, unable to see light or have contact with any living thing until the final day of judgment. The symbolism here is striking. Later, in Levitical law, God would command Israel to send a scapegoat into the desert on the Day of Atonement, carrying the sins of the people away. That scapegoat's destination was called Azazel, suggesting a direct connection to this imprisoned fallen angel. Third, God commanded Gabriel to destroy the Nephilim. But God's method was ingenious and just. Gabriel was to incite the giants to fight each other. The Nephilim loved violence. They had built their entire existence around domination through force. Very well, God would turn their violence against themselves. They would destroy each other through the very brutality they had cultivated. This ensured that the Nephilim would be destroyed by their own nature, not arbitrarily zapped out of existence. Their end would mirror their essence. Fourth, God commanded Michael to bind Samyaza and all the other Watchers. They were to be imprisoned in darkness beneath the earth for 70 generations, roughly 3,500 years until the day of final judgment. This is the kind of detailed biblical content you won't find anywhere else. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. These Watchers would be fully conscious in their prisons, aware of every moment of their punishment, unable to see or touch or experience anything except darkness and their own guilt. They would have millennia to regret their choice before facing their final sentence. Each archangel had a mission. Each mission addressed a specific aspect of the crisis. Together, they formed a comprehensive response to the catastrophe the Watchers had caused. But this response would take time to unfold. And during that time, the horrors on earth would continue, indeed, would intensify. Chapter 8, Divine Judgment begins. Raphael moved first, descending from heaven on his mission to imprison Azazel. The Book of Enoch describes this confrontation in vivid terms. Azazel, who had taught humans how to forge weapons of war, found himself powerless against an archangel acting with divine authority. He couldn't fight, he couldn't flee, he couldn't negotiate. Raphael seized him with hands that burned like fire and bound him with chains that no created being could break. These weren't mere physical restraints. They were spiritual bindings that constrained Azazel's very nature, preventing him from using any of his angelic powers. Then Raphael carried Azazel to Dewdale, a desolate place in the wilderness. The location's identification is uncertain. Some scholars place it in the Judean desert, others in more distant wastelands. What's clear is that it was utterly barren, inhospitable, a place of death. There, Raphael cast Azazel into a pit among sharp, jagged rocks. The Book of Enoch describes these stones cutting into Azazel's spiritual form, causing pain that wouldn't end. Then Raphael covered the opening with more massive stones, sealing Azazel in complete darkness. No light, no sound, no touch except the sharp rocks. No company except his own thoughts, just eternal awareness of his fall, his guilt, and the punishment he had earned. The text says Azazel will remain there until the day of judgment, when he will be cast into the fire. This intermediate imprisonment isn't his final punishment, it's the waiting period before his eternal sentence. Imagine being Azazel in that moment of being who had existed since the dawn of creation, who had seen the cosmos formed, who had served in heaven's courts, now reduced to a prisoner in darkness counting the millennia until his ultimate destruction. The Book of Enoch adds a particularly haunting detail. Raphael was to cover his face so that Azazel cannot see light. This suggests that even in imprisonment, there was concern that Azazel might influence the world if he could observe it. His very gaze had to be blocked. While Raphael dealt with Azazel, Michael began the harder task of hunting down and binding all the other Watchers. These weren't concentrated in one location, they had spread across the earth, establishing themselves as gods and kings in different regions. Michael went from place to place with methodical determination. The Watchers, despite their power, couldn't stand against an archangel empowered by God. One by one, Michael captured them. Some tried to hide among humanity, but Michael could perceive their true nature. Some tried to hide in the wilderness, but there was no place beyond Michael's reach. Some tried to fight, but their rebellion had already stripped them of their authority to resist heaven's judgment. Each Watcher was bound and cast into pits of darkness, locations the text describes as being in the valleys of the earth. These weren't metaphorical prisons, they were actual physical places in deep caves and chasms where no light penetrated. Samyaza, the ringleader who had organized the original rebellion, received special attention. Michael bound him most securely of all and cast him into the deepest darkness. The text suggests his prison was not just dark, but somehow weighted, pressing down on him with spiritual heaviness that matched his guilt. The Watchers who had once walked proudly on earth, who had taken human wives and taught forbidden knowledge, now sat in chains beneath the very ground they had polluted. But their giant children were still alive, still terrorizing humanity. That's where Gabriel's mission came in. Like this content? Hit that like button and share it with someone interested in biblical mysteries. Gabriel didn't directly attack the Nephilim. Instead, he worked on their minds and spirits, inflaming their pride and paranoia. The giants, who had always been violent, suddenly became suspicious of each other. Old rivalries intensified. Disputes over territory and tribute turned into blood feuds. Different Nephilim clans that had coexisted in tense peace suddenly saw each other as mortal threats. And then they went to war. When giants fight, the earth itself suffers. The Book of Enoch describes battles that lasted for years, that scarred landscapes that destroyed everything in their paths. Whole regions became uninhabitable wastelands as the giants waged their wars. Humans watched from hiding as the monsters that had terrorized them turned on each other. With each dead giant, humanity had a little more room to breathe, a little less tribute to pay, a slightly greater chance of survival. The Nephilim wars reduced their population significantly, but they didn't eliminate all the giants. Even as they fought among themselves, they continued to prey on humans and animals. The world remained violent and corrupted, but while the angels worked to execute divine judgment, Uriel had delivered his message to Noah, and Noah had begun building the ark. He had 120 years to complete it, a number that appears repeatedly in the biblical account. For more than a century, Noah worked on this massive vessel while preaching to his neighbors about the coming judgment. Imagine being Noah. Your entire world is corrupt. Giants rule through terror. Violence is everywhere. Most of humanity has abandoned God completely. And you're building a boat on dry land, preparing for a flood that has never happened before. Your neighbors mock you. They think you're insane. Even your extended family probably questions your sanity. But you keep building because an angel told you this was the only way to survive what was coming. And all the while, the giants continued their wars. The bound Watchers screamed in their dark prisons, and God prepared to wash the earth clean. Asterisk, chapter 9, Where of the Gents. The wars between the Nephilim deserve more attention because they represent something profound. The principle that evil eventually consumes itself. The giants had built their entire existence on violence and domination. They knew no other way to interact with the world. For years, this violence had been directed outward against humans, against animals, against the environment. But once Gabriel planted seeds of paranoia and rivalry, the giants' violent nature turned inward. They began applying to each other the same brutal logic they had used on humanity. The strongest survive. The weak must serve or die. Conflict resolves through superior force. The result was catastrophic warfare on a scale the world had never seen. Historical legends from cultures worldwide preserve memories of giant wars. Greek mythology describes the Gigantomachy, the war between the giants and the Olympian gods. Norse myths tell of constant battles between the Jotnar, giants, and the Aesir, gods. Hindu epics describe wars between Asuras, demon giants, and Devas, gods. Are these independent inventions, or are they different cultural memories of the same ancient events, filtered through different theological lenses? The Book of Enoch suggests that these giant wars served multiple purposes in God's plan. First, they reduced the Nephilim population significantly. Every giant that died meant fewer mouths to feed from humanity's dwindling resources, less pressure on the fragile human population trying to survive. Second, the wars demonstrated the ultimate futility of might makes right philosophy. The Nephilim had lived by violence, now they would die by it. Their own weapon turned against them. Third, the wars revealed the complete moral bankruptcy of the Nephilim. Despite their supernatural intelligence and angelic heritage, they couldn't rise above their corrupted natures. Given the opportunity, they chose destruction even of their own kind. The battles themselves must have been extraordinary to witness. Giants wielding trees as clubs, hulling boulders the size of houses, their roars shaking the mountains. When two 20-foot giants collided in combat, the shockwave could flatten everything nearby. Ancient texts describe the earth literally shaking during these battles, whether from the physical impacts or from supernatural forces at play. Whole forests were leveled as giants used trees as weapons. Rivers were diverted when giants' bodies damned them. Mountains were scarred by giants hurling stones at each other. The few humans who survived this period must have felt like insects, watching titans battle above them, never knowing when they might be accidentally crushed underfoot. But even as the giants destroyed each other, their violence continued against humanity. A giant preparing for war needed weapons and armor, which meant enslaved humans working forges day and night. A giant's army needed food, which meant confiscating everything humans had managed to grow or hunt. If you're finding this fascinating, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Biblical history is more intense than any action movie. In some ways, the giant wars made life even harder for the surviving humans in the short term. The giants became more demanding, more desperate, more willing to use extreme violence to get what they needed. But in the longer term, the wars were depleting the Nephilim population. Each year, there were fewer giants. Each battle left more of them dead. The problem was solving itself slowly, violently, but inevitably. Still, even with their reduced numbers, the remaining giants were enough to keep humanity in bondage and terror. Complete elimination of the Nephilim through warfare alone would have taken too long. Many humans would have died in the meantime. God's plan required something more dramatic, something total, something that would reset creation and give humanity a fresh start. The flood wasn't just coming. It was necessary. Noah kept building. Chapter 10. The Great Deluge just reigned number 12. After 120 years of construction, Noah's Ark was finally complete. It was massive, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high according to Genesis's dimensions. Large enough to hold Noah's family and representatives of all the uncorrupted animal species. The Book of Enoch emphasizes that Noah's family was genetically pure, untainted by the angelic human mixing that had corrupted so many other bloodlines. This was crucial. The flood would destroy the hybrid corruption and preserve true humanity. When the ark was ready, God commanded Noah to gather the animals and load them aboard. The text describes this as a miraculous process. The animals came to Noah willingly, guided by divine providence. 2 of each kind, 7 pairs of clean animals, entered the ark. These weren't just any animals. They were the uncorrupted ones, animals that hadn't been genetically manipulated by the Watcher's experiments, that hadn't been crossbred into chimeras, that represented what God had originally created. When everyone was aboard, God himself sealed the door. This is a significant detail. Noah didn't close the door from inside. God closed it from outside. The salvation of Noah's family was entirely God's action, not their achievement. And then it began to rain. The Genesis account describes water coming from two sources. The windows of heaven opened above, and the fountains of the great deep burst forth from below. This wasn't ordinary rain. It was the cosmos itself being temporarily unmade, the waters above and below reuniting as they had been before creation. Ancient Israelites understood the world as having water above, from which rain fell, and water below, the deep oceans underground springs. God had separated these waters during creation to make space for dry land and life. Now he was temporarily allowing them to reunite. The result was water everywhere, rising inexorably, foot by foot, hour by hour, day by day. At first, people didn't understand the danger. They'd seen rain before. They'd weathered floods. They thought they could outlast this storm, but the water kept rising. When it reached their ankles, they moved to higher ground. When it reached their waists, they climbed to rooftops. When it reached the rooftops, they climbed trees. When it covered the trees, they climbed hills. When it covered the hills, they climbed mountains. The Book of Enoch tells us that as the water rose, people finally believed Noah's warnings. They ran to the ark and begged to be let in. They pounded on the sealed door, screaming for mercy, but it was too late. The time for repentance had passed. 120 years of warnings had been ignored. The door was sealed. One by one, they drowned. And the Nephilim? At first, they must have thought their size would save them. While humans drowned in 10 feet of water, the giants could still walk. While humans struggled to swim, the giants waded forward. But the water kept rising. 20 feet, 40 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, 200 feet. Even the tallest giant couldn't keep his head above water forever. One by one, the Nephilim, these mighty warriors who had terrorized the earth, who had eaten humans like cattle, who had considered themselves invincible, drowned like everyone else. Asterisk drop a comment. Do you think Noah's flood was local or global? The evidence might surprise you. Asterisk, the text says the water covered even the highest mountains to a depth of over 20 feet. Every land animal that wasn't on the ark died. Every human except Noah's family perished. Every giant was destroyed. For 150 days the water covered the earth. 5 months of water, silence, and death. The ark floated alone on a planet-wide ocean, carrying the only land-dwelling survivors. Finally, God remembered Noah. Not that he had forgotten. Remembered in Hebrew carries the sense of taking action on behalf of someone. God acted to end the flood. He sent wind to help the water evaporate. He closed the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven. Slowly, the water began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, a mountain range in modern-day Turkey. As the water continued to drop, the peaks emerged like islands in a shrinking ocean. Noah sent out birds to test whether the water had receded enough. First a raven, which flew back and forth, then a dove, which returned because it couldn't find a place to land. A week later, another dove, which returned with an olive leaf proof that plants were growing again. Another week, and the dove didn't return. It had found a place to make its home. Finally, more than a year after entering the ark, Noah and his family emerged onto dry ground. They stepped out into a washed, clean world. The giants were gone. The corrupted animals were gone. The evil humans were gone. The watchers were imprisoned. It was a new beginning. Noah's first act was to build an altar and offer sacrifices to God in thanksgiving. God responded with a promise. Never again would he destroy all life with a flood. He placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign of this covenant. But there was a problem that wouldn't become apparent until later. The giants' bodies were gone, destroyed by the flood. But what happened to their spirits? Asterisk chapter 11, spirits without bodies. This is where the Book of Enoch's teaching becomes crucial for understanding biblical demonology. When the Nephilim died in the flood, something unprecedented happened, or rather, didn't happen. When normal humans die, their spirits go to Sheol, the realm of the dead, to await final judgment. When angels fall, they're imprisoned in darkness as the Watchers were. But what happens when beings who are half human and half angel die? The Nephilim were hybrids that shouldn't have existed in the first place. They didn't fit into the normal categories of creation. Their existence violated the boundaries God had established. When they died, their spirits had nowhere to go. Human destinations wouldn't work. They weren't fully human. Angelic destinations wouldn't work. They weren't fully angelic. They were ontologically homeless, caught between categories. So their spirits remained on earth disembodied, desperate and furious. The Book of Enoch is explicit about this. The spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle and work destruction on the earth. These spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women. These disembodied spirits are what we call demons. Think about the implications. Demons, according to this text, aren't fallen angels themselves. Fallen angels, the Watchers, are bound in prison. Demons are the spirits of the dead Nephilim wandering the earth without bodies. This explains several things that are otherwise mysterious. First, it explains why demons seem so desperate to possess physical bodies. In the Gospels, when Jesus casts out demons, they beg to be sent into a herd of pigs rather than being left without any physical form. Why? Because they're spirits that once had giant bodies, and they desperately crave physical existence again. They remember what it was like to taste food, to feel sensations, to interact physically with the world. Now they're reduced to bodiless awareness, capable of perception but not interaction unless they can possess a living creature. Second, it explains demons' apparent hierarchy and organization. When the giants were alive, they had kingdoms and rulers. Their spirits maintain these hierarchies. Some demons are more powerful than others. Some command others, some have territories they consider theirs. Third, it explains demons' intimate knowledge of humanity and earthly affairs. These spirits came from beings born of human mothers. They've been on Earth the entire time since the flood, roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years. They've watched every civilization rise and fall. They know human nature intimately because they're partly human themselves. Fourth, it explains why demons seem particularly interested in teaching humanity the same things the Watchers taught before the flood. These spirits learned from their angelic fathers. They remember the secrets of metallurgy, warfare, magic, astrology, and all the forbidden knowledge. They're trying to continue their father's work. Asterisk, this is changing how you think about spiritual warfare, isn't it? Subscribe and share this with others who need to understand. The Book of Enoch describes these demonic spirits as having insatiable hunger and thirst, but no way to satisfy it. They're eternally frustrated, eternally angry, taking out their rage on humanity. They can't physically harm people by themselves. They lack bodies to do so, but they can oppress people spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. They can influence thoughts, amplify negative emotions, suggest destructive behaviors. And in some cases, when a person's spiritual defenses are down, a demon can actually enter and possess them, using their body as the demon wishes. The text says these demons will remain active on earth until the final judgment. They know their ultimate fate, the same lake of fire where their fathers will be thrown. But that judgment is still future. In the meantime, they work to cause as much destruction as possible. Some interpreters read the Book of Enoch as suggesting that demons aren't identical in type. Those descended from different giant bloodlines have different characteristics and specialties. Demons descended from Azazel's children might especially promote violence and warfare. Those from Gadrol's line might specialize in deception and poisoning. Those from Casbeel's line might focus on sexual sin and abortion. This would explain why deliverance ministries sometimes identify demons with specific functions: spirits of addiction, spirits of lust, spirits of violence. These aren't metaphorical. They're literal spirits with particular focuses inherited from their Watcher ancestors. The number of these demons is staggering. If there were thousands of Nephilim before the flood and each giant spirit became a demon, then there are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of demons active on Earth right now. That sounds terrifying. But the Book of Enoch also makes clear that these demons are not all powerful. They're limited. They can only work within boundaries God allows. They cannot possess someone who is truly submitted to God's protection, and they're terrified of judgment of the final day when they'll join their fathers in eternal punishment. This is why demons react so strongly when confronted by godly authority. In the Gospels, they immediately recognize Jesus and beg him not to torment them before the appointed time. They know judgment is coming. They know they can't ultimately win, but they're trying to take as many humans down with them as they can. Ask chapter 12, the battle continues today. The story of the Nephilim isn't just ancient history, it's ongoing reality. If the Book of Enoch is correct, the spiritual forces we battle today are directly descended from that prehistoric corruption. The Apostle Paul wrote, "Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." He understood that human evil is often influenced, amplified, or directed by non-human spiritual entities. These powers and spiritual forces that Paul mentions, many scholars believe he's referring to the same entities the Book of Enoch describes. The demons that were once Nephilim spirits, and possibly hierarchies of fallen angels who haven't yet been imprisoned. This framework helps explain why evil seems to have patterns and continuity across cultures and centuries. Why do the same types of sins, violence, sexual exploitation, greed, pride appear in every society? Why does each generation seem to rediscover the same destructive behaviors? Perhaps because the same spiritual entities are teaching the same lessons they learned from the Watchers thousands of years ago. Consider how the things the Watchers taught before the flood parallel temptations today, as Zazzal taught weapon making and warfare. Today's world is saturated with weapons technology, military-industrial complexes, and the glorification of violence in media. War is more advanced than ever. Azazel taught beautification arts for manipulation. Today's society is obsessed with appearance, cosmetic surgery, using physical attractiveness for power and influence. The beauty industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Gadriel taught secret killing and poison. Today we have political assassinations, mysterious deaths of whistleblowers and inconvenient people, and substances that can kill undetectably. Caspiel taught abortion and striking the embryo in the womb. Abortion is one of the most contentious issues of our time, with millions performed annually worldwide. Barakiel taught astrology. Despite scientific advancement, horoscopes and astrology remain wildly popular, with people making life decisions based on star signs. Kokobiel taught divination and omens, psychic hotlines, tarot readings, fortune-telling. These industries thrive despite their spiritual dangers. The parallels are striking. It's as if the same corrupting influences that operated before the flood are operating now, using modern technology and cultural forms but pursuing the same agenda, disconnecting humanity from God and promoting the knowledge and behaviors that led to the first judgment. Ask Dublov, what patterns do you see in our modern world that echo pre-flood corruption? Let me know in the comments. The Book of Enoch suggests that in the last days before Christ's return, conditions will become similar to those before the flood. Jesus himself said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." What does that mean, practically? It suggests we should expect increasing violence, sexual immorality, pride, corruption of nature, and people living as if God doesn't exist, exactly what Genesis describes before the flood. Some interpreters go further, suggesting that genetic manipulation, transhumanism, and attempts to enhance humanity through technology might be modern parallels to the Watchers' corruption of human genetics. Whether or not you agree with that specific interpretation, the pattern is clear. Each generation faces the same spiritual battles because the spiritual enemies remain the same. So how do we fight? The Book of Enoch and Scripture agree on several principles. First, recognize the reality of spiritual warfare. Evil isn't just human weakness or social structures. There are intelligent, malevolent spiritual entities working to destroy humanity and dishonor God. Second, avoid the pathways demons use to gain influence. Stay away from occult practices, divination, astrology, attempts to contact the dead, and magic. These are invitations to demonic influence. Third, maintain spiritual disciplines. Prayer, scripture reading, worship, fasting, and community with other believers create spiritual defenses that demons cannot easily penetrate. Fourth, wear the spiritual armor Paul describes in Ephesians 6: truth, righteousness, readiness to share the gospel, faith, salvation, and the word of God. These aren't metaphors, they're real spiritual protections. Fifth, remember that demons are already defeated. Christ's death and resurrection broke their ultimate power. They're fighting a losing battle. Their time is limited. The final judgment is coming. Not might be coming, but is coming. The Book of Enoch describes it in vivid detail. The imprisoned watchers will be brought out of their dark prisons and cast into the lake of fire. The demons wandering the earth will be gathered and thrown in as well. All the corruption, violence, and rebellion that began when the watchers descended to Mount Hermon will finally, completely, permanently end. And those who have remained faithful to God through all the spiritual battles will be vindicated and rewarded. They'll live in a renewed creation where the divisions between heaven and earth are healed, where God dwells directly with humanity, where there's no more death or mourning or crying or pain. The old order, the corrupted order that began when angels violated their boundaries, will have passed away forever. Until that day comes, the battle continues, not with weapons of metal, but with weapons of faith, truth, and righteousness, not against human enemies primarily, but against the ancient evil that has plagued humanity since the days when giants walked the earth. Every time you resist temptation, you're striking a blow against entities that have been promoting that temptation for thousands of years. Every time you choose truth over deception, you're defying demons who have been lying since before recorded history. Every time you pray, you're accessing power that demons fear because they know it comes from the God who already defeated them at the cross. The story of the Nephilim, properly understood, isn't meant to terrify us. It's meant to give us clarity about the nature of our struggle and confidence in the victory that's already been secured. The giants are dead. The watchers are bound. The demons are limited and doomed. And Christ has already won. We're just living out the final chapters before that victory is fully manifested. And when we understand the scope of what we're part of a cosmic drama that began before the flood and will conclude with the final judgment, it should give us courage, purpose, and hope. The same God who brought Noah through the flood will bring us through our trials. The same God who bound the watchers will ultimately destroy all evil. The same God who washed the earth clean once will do so again, not with water, but with fire that will purify creation forever. If this has given you new insight into spiritual warfare and biblical history, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of Scripture. And most importantly, stay faithful, because the battle is real, but the victory is certain. This is the message of the Nephilim. Evil is real, powerful, and ancient. But God is more real, more powerful, and eternal. And He has never, not once in all of history, failed to keep His promises. The angels who rebelled were judged. The giants who terrorized humanity were destroyed. The demons who remain will be cast out. And those who trust in God will be saved. From the days before the flood to the present moment to the age to come, this has always been God's pattern. Justice for evil, salvation for the faithful, and ultimate restoration of all that was corrupted. That's not just an ancient story, that's a present reality and a future guarantee. And that's why the tale of the Nephilim, as strange and disturbing as it is, ultimately gives us hope.